I want to make sure we cover some foreign policy as well, because you're running as commander in chief. Nothing drives me more crazy than when people talk to presidents and they don't talk about the most power that they have
Isn't
that
that the
controls
truth?
fire.
Isn't
You
that
had
the truth, though, brother?
you had the entire Republican debate, and they spent 15 minutes on foreign policy.
Absolutely.
Deeply unserious shit. So this is something that the president of the United States is definitely going to deal with, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. You have BRICS, and this is the consequence of United States imperialism, sanctions, and the global South losing faith in the United States and the West, where BRICS is a new global bloc that is looking for de-dollarization. And now you have a massive development that happened in the last few weeks. And you notice, Dr. West, the deeply unserious corporate media and all the candidates running for president are not talking about this.
That's true.
Some of the most important shit that's going on right now. So you have Ethiopia, you have Egypt, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Iran, you have Argentina. They joined BRICS. And this is a big deal. You have around 52% of the global oil reserves, 1/4 of the global economy, 40% of the global population. So I want to get your thoughts on this and how you would respond to this new mentality that is developing among the majority of the world, by the way, where they don't trust the United States because they're used to sanctions and they want to de-dollarize. So what's your thoughts on this new development, BRICS as a whole, and how will you deal with this as president? What's your thoughts on this, Dr. West?
Well, I mean, one is that, again, because I look at the world through the lens of a Frantz Fanon-like perspective, in which the wretched of the earth, who are the vast majority of the earth, who are the least of these in my own Christian tradition of Matthew 25, what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me, says Jesus, that decolonization has to be a fully throated process. And the first stage was completed in terms of the political shift, but colonization still takes place in a variety of different ways. So one of the great ironies, if not paradoxes, of my moment in a movement called the campaign to run for president is how, in fact, to ensure that the poor and working classes in the United States, in the American empire, can be empowered alongside the empowerment of poor and working class peoples around the world. So that's decolonization in the deepest sense that Fanon was talking about. Now, as you remember, though, in that wonderful chapter, The Pitfalls of National Consciousness, that what you're talking about in terms of the BRICS group has to do with the leaders, you see. And many of those leaders, which I would give critical support and sometimes downright critical indictment of, many of those leaders are themselves just extension of their own bourgeoisies in their own nation states that are not attending to the plight and predicament of their own poor and of their own working classes. So if they, and I would have to go nation state by nation state, leader by leader, because I can't homogenize all the variety of voices, of BRICS and so forth. Right? As you know, I mean, Brazil is very different under Lulu than it was under the gangster. Very different priorities. So I'd have different kind of relations. And same would be true in various African countries. So that I would not want to in any way downplay the degree to which a gathering of leaders of so-called global South are speaking on behalf of poor and working people in the way in which they ought. I would love to have a relation with Brother Cyril. I know Brother Cyril when he was head of the trade union movement. He was a revolutionary then. He's not now. He rules as a neoliberal leader of South Africa. His critiques of U.S. foreign policy can be powerful. I can agree with him on that. But at the same time, I also critical of his own policies because I'm in solidarity with the poor and the working class in South Africa, not just the elected officials and the bourgeoisies in South Africa. And so you can see how it gets complicated in terms of talking about the ways in which the BRIC nations that I would want to critically support, to the degree to which they are promoting full-scale decolonization that makes sure they are empowering their own poor and their own working class. Now they can come back to me and say, "Oh, Brother West, you meddling in our affairs." And I say, "You don't say." I'm committed to poor and working people everywhere, not just New York, but Lagos, not just Los Angeles, New Delhi, not just Dallas, Buenos Aires. So that would, so I think that we'd have fascinating coming togethers, because they would say, "Oh, wow, we for the first time in the history of America have an anti-imperialist leader who wants America to be a nation among nations rather than an empire that other nations have to submit to." That's a whole different framework. But in that framework, I'm not in any way going to be blinded to the particular class interests and class sense biases of a leadership if those leaders are not fundamentally committed to their own poor and their own working class. You all see the point that I'm making.
Yeah, absolutely. I see BRICS as the consequence of the United States actions, especially Western sanctions. You have countries that want to escape Western sanctions. Lula in Brazil, his language is not as strong regarding BRICS compared to Putin and Xi Jinping, because Putin and Xi Jinping wants to pull people away from American influence and start de-dollarization because they want to weaken the influence of U.S. sanctions. Having a strong BRICS will undermine U.S. sanctions. And we all know U.S. sanctions have been one of the most destructive tools of the U.S. empire in modern times. Here Lula saying and calling out the IMF for destroying Argentina's economy with debt. And that's why, as anti-imperialists, BRICS offer a great solution for people, because yes, we have bourgeoisies and in these countries that may not have the best interests of workers at heart. But when you look at the IMF and Western economic institutions, they create a situation where the workers and the peasants of these countries always lose. And we want at least these countries to have the sovereignty. But just for the sake of time, I actually got to be more rapid fire on these, because I know you.
Right. But let me just say this, brother, that when I talk about dismantling the American empire, I'm talking about this. When I talk about dismantling the American empire, I'm talking about dismantling all of the instrumental forms of that empire operating. You see, so I mean, IRF has a long history of choking nations with debt, right? It's been a fundamental arm of the American empire. NATO in its own distinctive ways too. These are the very things that are being called into question when you're talking about an anti-imperial president.